Commissioner Adams, Commissioner Archibald,
Here.
Commissioner Bell, Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Hensel,
Yes.
Commissioner Marshall, Manager Little,
Here.
Mayor Mohammed, Chairman Reed.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Make a motion for approval.
I move that we approve the agenda.
Motion is made by the chairman and supported by vice chair. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Archibald,
Yes.
Commissioner Henry,
Yes.
Commissioner Hensel,
Yes.
Manager Little,
Yes.
Chairman Reed.
Yes.
Motion carried.
At this time, I'd like to open the meeting up for public comments. If you want to speak, you have 3 minutes. If not, I'll close the public segment and move on to new business. Since the special commission is just for that purpose, there is no new business, and we would consider that the zoning ordinance review and update as old business. So we'll move directly to presentation by Mr. Brad Richner, representative of McKenna. To give us an update, sir?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Appreciate it. Pleasure to be back here, and I want to say good afternoon to everybody and all the commissioners as well. So today we are here to discuss the continuation of the zoning ordinance update. And so I have a brief presentation, and then would like to get into feedback from the commission and from the public on the zoning ordinance. So with that, can we go ahead and put this up on the screen? I have a PowerPoint presentation. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, very good. Again, so my name is Brad Meisner, and I'm a senior principal planner with McKenna Associates, and we've been hired by the city to help update the city zoning ordinance to be consistent with the Benton Harbor Master Plan. And, oops, one moment. Okay, here we go. So for today's presentation, just talk about the status of the draft zoning ordinance, where we are. Talk about the status of the draft zoning map that goes hand in hand with the zoning ordinance. And then I want to move into discussion and feedback from the Planning Commission and from the public, and then talk about the next steps in the process. As I indicated at the last meeting, what the zoning ordinance process is intended to do is to create a brand new full draft of an updated zoning ordinance, which would regulate property throughout the city, both residential, commercial, industrial zones. So this zoning ordinance has been updated and has been prepared, it's currently under review. The ordinance really is to reinforce the recommendations and the objectives that you prepared within your master plan. If the master plan is your master plan for the city, it's a blueprint of your future, the zoning ordinance now becomes the rules, regulations, and laws to implement that master plan. The new zoning ordinance would be updated graphically, will have updated use tables and classifications, and will be much easier to use, be newly formatted with clear administrative procedures. Some of the key issues that are being worked on throughout the zoning ordinance is to promote a mix of uses throughout the city, to promote a variety of housing types, and we've had some substantial conversations around trying to address the missing middle housing type, right? So that's your duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, smaller scale housing in the neighborhoods. Also, we are going to work to implement best zoning practices throughout the document. There's been an effort to look closely at the waterfront areas to preserve waterfront areas and respect those areas for open space and recreation. and also to make sure that the ordinance and the processes within it, that the procedures are easy for staff, for the public, for developers, for anybody that's interested in creating a project within the city to understand. As far as where we are to date, we've had several versions of the ordinance. We met last on March 27th with the PC subcommittee. After that meeting, a new memo was created to update the Planning Commission as to where we are. There have been some updated changes to the ordinance and the zoning map that was prepared and sent over on April 2nd. And then just to talk a little bit specifically about some of those changes from that last meeting. If you'll recall, we needed to go through the use tables and really make sure that the use tables were proper and have been updated. We have added footnotes to the end of the use table, which clarifies where permitted uses are allowed throughout the different zoning districts, to clearly indicate which uses are special uses that would have to come before the Planning Commission and City Commission, and then also which uses within the use table would be considered accessory uses. So things that are accessory to a primary permitted use or a special land use. We took a careful look at some specific uses, such as body art types of establishments. We talked a little bit about greenhouses, the difference of commercial and also greenhouses that you might find associated with a residential property. We talked a little bit about single-room occupancy housing and where that might be allowed. We talked about what would occur in instances if a shipping container were to be proposed as a use for housing purposes. Would the ordinance allow for that? And again, we talked about greenhouses and nurseries. So what was provided in the memo are some new proposed definitions for the commission's consideration. Those would clarify when a greenhouse is commercial, when a greenhouse is non-commercial, just have some clarity around what is considered to be a nursery. We talked about the single-room occupancy housing, so we've created a definition there around that to clarify that. And then also we created a sample definition of what we're calling alternative housing construction types. So that's meant to really allow for a definition around when somebody's using a different material for construction of housing, just to be very clear when that would apply. There's also a lot of conversation around ensuring that the design standards, that really appropriate design throughout the city that would meet the policies and objectives of the master plan, how do we make sure that that's coming alive through the zoning ordinance as well? And so part of the memo has some considerations of how the city might approach design review. So there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You could have design standards for every zone, residential, commercial, and industrial, so that when an application were to come in for a brand new building, let's say, staff or the planning commission is ensuring that those buildings are meeting all of those standards. Checklists, forms can be created to make sure that those new buildings are consistent with the design standards that you're looking to promote, to make sure that buildings are appropriate in scale and mass and feel within the different neighborhoods and areas throughout the city. And then last but not least, we've had a lot of robust conversations around parking and how do we make sure that we're still able to get the types of housing that you'd like to see throughout the city, the types of buildings that you'd like to see throughout the city without parking being the main driver. So oftentimes what you'll find is that there are so many parking requirements that have to be fulfilled. Sometimes the site plan or the building design can suffer to some degree. So that's another conversation around whether or not allowing for some level of parking flexibility throughout the code should be allowed. Also, as we've discussed, there has been a couple of versions of the new draft zoning map that would go along with the zoning ordinance. As you know, the draft zoning map is going to identify areas throughout the city for residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use recreation. The new map allows for increased housing opportunities throughout the city. It allows more local serving commercial areas and nodes along some of the commercial corridors, and also preservation of waterfront areas. After the last meeting, we did update the actual legend on the map to be consistent with all of the zoning districts that have been established in the previous draft of the zoning ordinance. And then just kind of a few concluding remarks is that, again, the ordinance is really to reinforce the master plan. So we'll make sure that that's clear. We're making sure that the ordinance will comply with the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. So that's the state law. We'll make sure that there's consistency with the master plan. The ordinance really is meant to help preserve and enhance the neighborhoods. And it is a comprehensive update of the entire zoning ordinance. So the next steps and where we are is to continue to ensure that all land use policies have been addressed. We want to make sure that we've addressed everything that the Planning Commission and the public, if there's any lingering concerns, we'll make sure to address those. After that, we'll go on a full review of quality control of the document to make sure all the graphics are up to date, to make sure everything that just looks beautiful. We'll finalize that draft zoning ordinance and the map, and then we'll go ahead and prepare a full public noticing for public hearings that would go before the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Commission for final adoption and review. And so with that, I'm here today to hear any further comments, to take further feedback from the public, and then the idea would be with any remaining feedback or comments, we'd go back and address those within the ordinance and then start making preparations for a public hearing before the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Recognize Allison.
Yes. One area that I'm concerned about, Brad, in terms of the residential areas, I'd like to see something in our zoning ordinances that would prevent parking on grass. If you're going to park, they need to be on solid surfaces. And because right now, one of the problems that we're encountering is 2-bedroom units with eight vehicles around them, all on the grass, across the walk, and everywhere else. And that I can't develop a city and try to sell people on building a home next to that kind of issue. The other one that I think we need to take a look at, when I went to Michigan Municipal League session a couple of weeks ago, one of the documents, in fact, I'm going to get brought some back. I'm going to bring them up, was about energy storage units. And that one was close anyway to being on us, because that community change grant, if it does get released and all the way, part of what we're going to be dealing with, and that is solar collection and energy storage units. And it made me recognize that we could also have those in residential neighborhoods and so forth, and there could be some concerns on those.
Okay.
Is that more of a solar? Are you talking about solar?
Yeah, and the lithium-ion storage batteries that store the energy.
May I say also that I&M is interested in where there are funding opportunities and trying to figure out where they could be located in the city to benefit the city itself, to allow for more flexibility with the grid. So that is something we overlook.
And would be interesting in how many of our public buildings that might be able to take advantage of this type of technology.
Absolutely, because written into the Community Change Grant plan, we envisioned not only Bobo Brazil Center, but City Hall and the water plant facility, possibly the library.
And school buildings also.
and also several churches that might be interested in participating as resiliency centers in the event that either power loss or some other situation
Zoning is
needed.
gonna play a factor in that, because the airport zoning rules, because you're within 10 miles, have to be careful when we look at that, so make sure when you write something in for solar, you take in account the airport zoning, because the reflection of incoming flights, that's gonna have to be.
This is just storage, though. So batteries, basically.
Yeah, but
Does anybody else?
somehow you gotta charge the batteries, and a lot of people are using solar to capture that energy.
Okay.
Just make sure if we have a solar ordinance that we include the airport zoning as a mandatory to be looked at.
Commissioner Adams,
There was only one thing, and then it became two, and then it became three. I agree with, what I heard City Manager Little just mention about parking on the lawns. I do, however, think that if a person has been caring for a property that may be empty before any type of development, and they need that extra parking, that they would be allowed to, but in a manner in which it doesn't look sloppy. I don't know what that would look like on ordinance or something like that. But for years, we have had residents like Pearl, and some of those over there are homeowners that are older, and you really can't park. And then we insist that they park off the street in the wintertime for plowing. They can't get through their alleys, which is where they are supposed to park, in the back of their homes. How can they do that if the city has not done their due diligence? And with the alleys, I mean, we have to do all things to make things make sense for everybody overall. So what I suggested many, many years ago, serving as a co-chair to economic development, was somehow, if we could, because I don't think that Pearl has been done yet, and I see this in other communities, and I see that St. Joe has done something similar to it. The street leading to the box factory there, the parking in a slant that would allow people to have company, to where they don't have to park on the line. Getting rid of the tree line, if we have to do that, to where they can park in a diagonal, angle, like Main Street should have been. I mean, I don't know what that would look like. And the second thing would be, you touch base on solar. Again, when I was sitting as co-chair, working with a young man that came before us on several occasions about solar, knowing, the direction, the youth know what's going on, looking out for their future when it comes to climate change. We were looking at the property that no purchased, 11 acres, and I was talking with the gentleman that came forth that has the, business out there now. If they would work with the city of Benton Harbor as it relates to solar panels being able to not only sell to the local residents, but beyond, because that's a lot of property. But I heard the gentleman mention, our code enforcement officer, something about the airport, because it's connected right there. But if somehow, some way, we could look at that and work with them, because it would be a cost savings to them as well if those panels could be aimed a different way, because I grew up here. I used to watch the big jumbo planes that used to actually come into Ben Harbor. They don't do that anymore. We're that's a little jet. We don't have that much traffic in and out to where air traffic control can't control, the solar glares. I don't know what that would look like, but I think that we need to take all things into account as it relates to climate change, energy efficiency. What that will look like in an ordinance, I don't know, but those conversations should be had. Just my suggestions. Thank you. I mean, we could actually sell some of this preserved energy to outsiders around, Benton Harbor.
There could be provisions put in there that if solar companies want to come into Benton Harbor, that the power stays local. A lot of them come in out of Chicago, and they ship the energy that they manufacture here downstate. They don't keep it local. A lot of it gets dispersed in other areas than here. We might want to have some rules in there that a percentage of it stays local.
That's where negotiations should take place, because Benton Harbor should be the sole and proprietary owner of.
But that all could be negotiated.
Exactly.
And from a land use perspective, just on that topic, what I might recommend is that you try to differentiate between the smaller facilities that, I think, as the city manager was mentioning, that might go out to the school, to a church,
Yeah.
versus a commercial establishment, that I would then highly recommend that we'd make those only approved through a special land use permit, that then the commission would have discretion over those. You could have conditions of approval that would really get to the heart of what I think we're talking about here.
Okay, if I may, I would really like to get some people in here to give a presentation, just being a member of the Decarbonization Coalition, as it relates to everything that we're discussing now, from some professionals that are working and not only working on these things coming to fruition, but funding sources for them, be it private, governmental, or whatever. Yeah, thank you.
Any additional comments from the?
I had a question, a quick question. Battery storage under minor utilities, 2.5.3.J in the draft.
Mr. Hansel, can you repeat that, please?
The April 2nd draft has the use tables and the different categories, and it seems like what we were just describing would fall under minor utilities, because it's not a generating plant, like a large utility use that would need to be in an industrial area. These are just batteries, basically.
Yeah, so let's go take a look at the definition to see if that includes that.
But I do think also we need to look at the larger possibilities, and I'm thinking, for example, to restrict certain types of operations from coming in. We, unlike many of our neighbors, we're only 4.3 square miles. I'd hate to see a situation where somebody has gotten their hands on 10 or 12 lots and want to try to put a solar farm on it in the city. We don't need that.
You restrict it to just residential.
Yes, with the newer cars coming out, we're finding that more and more people are updating their garages for this benefit. And if they could get the free energy from the sun, which wouldn't cost them anything extra, they could charge the batteries, which then in turn could charge the batteries in the car. And they're also looking at utilizing solar energy to replace the electric grids in many locations. So homes that are off the grid can store their own energy. One of the things about doing that in the city is that it could replace furnaces, air conditioners, things like that. These systems could power them. So these are a lot of things that we need to look at. But trying to predict the future is one of the issues we're going to run into, as you see with the parking. Parking in commercial areas, the demands in residential areas will be different, especially when you begin to look at multifamily housing. 2, 3, 4 units, you're going to need parking somewhere. And if we can't have enough parking for single-family homes, as soon as you put up an apartment building, here comes all of the issues with the people who live there and their guests. So on a weekend or a holiday, Where do all these people park? So these are some of the issues we look at, and trying to legislate or make rules for that now until the problem arises. We're solving problems that we haven't identified as problems.
So commercial solar, you could put acreage limits on it. Parking, in some of these multifamily zones that we want for parking, we can take some of them, if they're city-owned lots, and turn them into parking, so you have to walk a block or two to your house. We could accommodate parking by some of that matter in some of these higher density areas. It's just something to look at, or have the possibility in zoning that if the city-owned lots, or if you get 4 lots together and you want to turn it into residential parking for this district, you're allowed to do it. I mean, it's a way to address some of it. It keeps them off the street and it gives them a place to park, keeps them off the grass. I understand for the elder population, it's not ideal. But at least then we could give the older population, they would be able to park in their driveway. Anybody else would have to, walk a little bit.
And a lot of the requirements will depend upon the size of the lot.
Yep.
So those are things we'd have to look at also.
It's stuff that we could definitely address.
Going back to solar, there is an alternative energy place already described. It doesn't have a number, though. It's below 2.5.6.A. That one is telecommunications, and right below it is alternative energy that describes solar energy as an accessory, as a principal use, and wind energy as an accessory. But neither one of those is a battery storage facility.
Right, so I would recommend that we
separate.
clean that definition up to include it.
Any other comments? The use tables, I have discussed with our consultant that the zoning ordinance should be so simple. Person want to make changes or become a landlord or what have you, should be able to go to the city's website, pull up the ordinance, and walk through it and come out with some type of conclusion without involving the city staff. Right?
And also I would just add to that, part of the contract that we have that we were scoped to do was to create a bit of a user guide once we've adopted the ordinance. That would be a step-by-step handy guide that anybody would be able to use. And you could have it on the internet, you could have it on the website, for anybody to be able to pick that up and go step-by-step with how to go through, find your piece of land within the city, find out what it's zoned, and then look to the use charts to determine exactly what the process is.
Question? I forgot what meeting it was, Brownfield. It came up in the Brownfield. Are we working on something in the form of enterprise zoning or, what other zoning was that? Putting something in place for?
Nothing with enterprise zone.
Empire, what was that? That would be opportunity zoning. Are we working with those type of things, or is that something that comes with a dollar amount?
Part of the city is in an opportunity
Okay,
zone
okay.
already.
Okay.
Not all of it,
Looking-
but
okay.
significant portion.
Okay, is that more residential that is?
It really isn't. It just covers from the lake up through to about, I think it goes up to about Britain, and then about to where Ox Creek is, and then it
Okay.
comes back down.
Okay,
We've been looking for a couple of years at how to utilize the benefits of an opportunity zone. Most of it is focused on financing and investment by wealthy people looking to find tax-free income and so forth.
Did I hear you right, though, that it still exists from the lake to the, because
It still
I
exists.
live in that zone, and I thought that it had expired, because when Ms. Brown was Economic Development Director, it carried the weight of tax exemption, I think it was.
The opportunity zone is different than the enterprise zone and those things.
Okay,
It
okay.
isn't readily available to just
Okay,
individuals
okay.
as such.
Thank
But,
you.
I'd like to just comment again on the parking thing. I think we got a lot of work to do on parking, but my concern that I'm expressing right now has to do with a problem that's becoming an issue right now in the city, and that is small homes with 8 and 10 cars parked all around them, under the window, the back door, the front. We've got to stop it. We've got to stop it.
Provisions in the ordinance for hard surface and parking. A lot of it's just trying to police it and get it to move. Non-compliance, let's just say there's a lot of non-compliance out there. There's already zoning and ordinances out there for that.
Without,
It's a lot to try and police, and when you have 4 and 5 people in a house because there's a shortage of housing, what are you gonna do? You're gonna tell someone to move out, or are you gonna learn to, there's a lot to it. There's a lot that goes to it. There is a hard surface requirement for parking. But again, when you have 4 people living in a house, there's other code violations going on there too. It's more of a boarding house, so it gets a little dicey on how you want to handle that from the code enforcement side. And they're actively trying, but the minute you turn your back, it just goes back to the same thing. So.
The less fortunate.
And Laurel is making a very good point there, because it does get into the overcrowding issue. I mean, one thing is, like you say, 4 people in the house, but what we're seeing, I don't know whether it's 4 people or 10 people, when you're looking at 8 or 10 cars on one small lot parked all in the yard and stuff, that's a problem.
I mean, if we're working to try to clean up, then, I mean, but it's not for us to be enforcing, because I didn't know if you said 4 people or poor people, or both.
what we're concerned about is more and more young people are staying home longer before they move out on their own. So when you start talking about multifamily housing, you have 2 families, maybe 3 families. In my neighborhood, there's only so many houses on the block, but I'll assure you that the grown kids, 2, 3, 4 of them, are still living at home. And in the evening, here they all come, each one has its own mode of transportation, be it bicycle, motorcycle, or a car. And they're all over the place on the weekend when their neighbors come to visit, so.
I mean, but this is the time right here in planning and zoning with the master plan and making sure that everything is working together for everyone involved in our 4 square miles. And that includes making things accessible in a manner in which it accommodates.
I think
Because if
we,
I got 4 kids living at home that's, and each one of them have a car and they have to get to work, I mean, how do you fix that? What does it look like?
There is no good answer for what you're asking. I think if we could strategically place parking lots around the city in some of these vacant lots, we have a lot of vacant lots.
Yeah.
Or we could figure out how to get housing, get grants for housing,
Yeah.
middle income housing. A lot of these kids are, you can't afford a $200,000 or $300,000 house. You could maybe afford 150, so I mean, if we could get grants to get housing built, get some of these kids into their own house, get them first, and gear it towards first-time home buyers. Not established home buyers, not somebody looking to do a rental property, but somebody to get out and get them on their own,
And
self-sufficient.
it doesn't even have to be a home. It could be something like a small, what do you call those? What am I looking for?
Are you thinking tiny house?
Not a tiny, well, something small, but, why does it have to be called a tiny home? just because it's accommodating a tiny person.
It's a term.
I know. But, it could be like a kitchenette-like type of thing, you know, in sections to where they can just pull up and have access to their own driveway, being responsible for their own tiny space.
You're
How
talking
about that?
multifamily,
Something similar to that.
not single, yeah, you're talking multifamily.
Well, not necessarily. No, single. Single, like, kind of, sort of like the apartments out there, down from Chase Bank off Napier, those where the elderly people live. Small, visualize it, I mean, and give them their own driveway.
740 square feet is the limit for a small property.
Say that again?
740 feet, that's the smallest we'll allow.
700?
I mean, 700, yeah, 40 feet, 740,
740 feet.
right, square feet, I'm sorry. Hopefully, what I intended to accomplish today was to make sure that we have all of the basic requirements for the updates. Now, the conversations that we're having will take us even deeper, but to be aware of the time limits of our consultant, I want to make sure that, are we on track for what we need to do? If not, what's missing? What's the most outstanding thing right now that's preventing us from moving this toward the city commission's approval?
Sure. So, and I appreciate the conversation, I do, because many communities go through this very exercise. You try to capture everything, but things are going to evolve. So zoning ordinances do become fluid documents, so over the years, things will change. You will need to revisit them. What we're trying to do right now is to capture all of the issues that you have right now in front of you, and I think this is a great conversation. The conversation around parking is a real challenge, and you're not alone. So what I'm hearing a little bit about is, yes, there's a lot of overabundance of parking on lots, and that's because there's a housing shortage. There's other reasons as well. So one of the approaches you might take, and I can think a little bit about this, is maybe you need just some clear design standards on how parking needs to be. So even if there's more than probably that might be desirable, it still looks good and it's aesthetically pleasing in the neighborhood or the downtown or what have you. You know, another approach is looking at, so I think I heard a comment around some of the vacant lots, whether those are smaller public lots or even if it's a private parking lot, having a process to get some of those approved that would help with some of this overflow parking that you have. So those are a couple things there. Commissioner Reed, you asked, you know, are we close? I think you are. I think mechanically, there's a number of things that need to be looked at again, and I appreciate the comment, Commissioner Hensel, on the definitions. I think there's some cleanup there. But then you're always going to have those policy conversations. You're always going to have issues that come up that have to be sorted out, which way the community wants to go, and then you can create an ordinance to effectuate that. And so we're going to do the best we can to make sure that you're comfortable with what you have. I'll take some of the feedback here today and try to come up with a solution for you on that as well.
One of the main things I was concerned about is that the parking needs to have a little bit better resolution in the commercial districts downtown. So right now, that's some of the most outstanding things that I've been looking at. What area of the city will we focus our primarily reconstruction or additional construction at? Multifamily housing in the downtown area. Where do we place the parking? And those are some of the issues. Parking along bus routes, parking near our work centers. So those are some of the things we want to look at. Workforce housing.
Sure.
We're going to get a lot of parking issues. So those are some of the things we need to be more cognizant of.
And could I add just one thing too? I did present some options for the commission to consider. Some communities will allow for what's known as sort of, you know, it's like a variance, but it's not, it doesn't rise to that level of a variance under the Michigan statute. It'd be something like a reduced parking permit. So if you could find a justification for why you might want to allow a little bit lesser parking than what is proposed, that is an option. So you'd have criteria under which you would evaluate an application for a reduced parking permit. And so if it met all those criteria, then it could be permitted, and that's a way to encourage flexibility in design.
I'd like to also add that when we're looking at this, and it is a challenge, but, when we talk about vacant lots, I don't want to see a mud puddle because it's a vacant lot next to the house any more than do around the house. It still needs to be a hard surface. And I think part of that responsibility for providing reasonable parking for a building needs to go with the builder who's building it, or a developer or whoever. But it is a challenge. It's something that we really need to take a look at. And I don't have a simple solution for it. I just know right now when you go through town and you're looking at, there's a problem.
Commissioner Henson?
I just wanted to ask, I keep telling you about different places where the draft ordinance says something, but it occurred to me, perhaps some of the planning commissioners didn't see the April 2nd draft ordinance that was sent to everyone by email, and nobody requested any printed ones, we found out before the meeting. So some of these questions that we're asking are important questions, but they're also answered, or you can find them after the meeting. You'll be able to find what's already in there, so that if you have recommendations on what he's already got down, then we can go from there versus starting, we won't be starting from scratch. So the comments and questions about what types of housing might take the burden off of people starting their own housekeeping and, finding spaces for their cars and such. If you look under middle housing types on page 11 of it, which is one of the permitted use tables, you'll find, and just make a note to yourself now, to look under, in the permitted use tables on page 11, you'll find the description of the different types of housing that we've identified as important going forward. So I'll just read them off quickly, just so you get a sense. There's apartment building, bungalow court, which I think gets to the answer that we were talking about earlier of how we deal with smaller units and providing space at an affordable price. Carriage houses, side-by-side duplexes stacked, triplex, fourplex, row house, and then single family. So there's a chart that will show you where those things are allowed as of right. And really, there's only one thing, which is a fourplex, that might require special use in a specific area. Otherwise, they're all permitted. They can be done anywhere as long as they meet the building code and the zoning ordinance setbacks and requirements.
Okay. Chairman Reed, thank you. I'm thinking about what City Manager Little talked about, and it's been a problem for a long time with the parking up on the lawns and stuff. And it's a specific area where it's really heavy. And I think it's in, I don't know if that's the second, no, it's got to be the third ward, between Broadway and probably Union. And they are cutting down a lot of the trees over in those areas, at least on McAllister and some of those streets. And we need the trees. That's some of our oxygen. And we need to be thinking now, before the street is totally repaved. I mean, they're about to repave it, that we should be putting in those slanted parkings. And we may be too late. I don't think they've started pouring anything yet, but the street, McAllister, is kind of wide. And it wouldn't hurt to take away from some of the tree lawn to make slanted parking, to eliminate the excuse of actually parking on the lot. because I'm giving you an opportunity here to park on the street. I mean, this is something I think that we need to be looking at ASAP and seeing where the trees should be planted, because we definitely got to have trees planted.
One of the issues we need to take a look at is the neighborhood commercial districts. If we want to revitalize them, we need to take a look at, as you've indicated, parking in those areas. So that will come up to be an issue, so that something we'll take a look at.
And it's important that we do that because not all the streets have alleys where the homeowners or renters can actually park in the back.
We are going to take a look at what we call incremental development, and then we'll begin to look at what we need to do as we move from the downtown areas. When you look at the entire city, you have to more or less think something like a huge mall.
Yeah.
What is it you're trying to accomplish? Who are you doing these things for? And if you look at the master plan actually outlines a lot of this. So when we come along with the ordinance, that's simply to give us a procedure that we can follow that will give us the outcomes that the master plan is providing for us. But the meeting today was to make sure you had what you need to kind of bring this to a point where we can bring it before the city commission.
I think I do. I appreciate it.
Okay.
And it's revisable.
And that's what I was going to
Yeah.
say. You
Yeah.
aren't going to sit here today and solve all the problems for tomorrow. So let's not even think like that. Keeping in mind, and we're going to close as soon as we have our last comments, if that's what it is. Okay.
I was wondering if we wouldn't go over this again in the subcommittee just before we bring it back to the full commission with the changes that you've all asked for, so that we're sure that we've addressed what we can address in a final draft. And then also wanted to remind the chair that Mr. Meisner said he'd like to get citizen comments. We have a couple of citizens here.
I'll second the idea of diagonal parking in any street that is wide enough to allow it. We have very, very wide streets. Some of them are probably planned to be diagonal. The area around Union Park lacks parking, as well as Broadway Park or June Woods Park. So that's worthy of consideration for sure. And permeable parking, if we're going to add more or allow more, encourage more around residences, encourage that sort of thing. I parked on a lot next to Morris performance space last night. It was a pretty obviously a city-owned lot, but it was all permeable pavers, plowable, clean, tree islands included, universal space that is also a parking space. Those kind of things could be applied in many areas, I think, including City Center Park, which is asphalt's not the greatest in my mind.
Can we set the meeting for the subcommittee? Or do we need to poll all the members?
Could you repeat that question, please?
Subcommittee members, we're going to set a meeting for them to get back with consultants to make sure that these things that we've indicated today are included. And whether or not we need to add more or less before we move it forward. Next week, I'll be available any day of the week, anytime. Say that again, please.
22nd, 24th, and the 25th.
I'd have only one issue, which would be on Tuesday, the 22nd, is a library board meeting at 4. But other than that, I'm available during the days and all of those days, sometime.
Okay, we'll get a hold of our secretary and we'll set the date and I'll notify you all. Are there any other questions, issues? I make a motion that we adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Call the roll,
Support.
please. Motion's made by Commissioner Adams and supported by Commissioner Hensel.
Commissioner Adams?
Yes.
Commissioner Archibald? Yes. Commissioner Henry? Yes. Commissioner Hensel?
Yes.
Chairman Reed? Motion carried.